Happy Tuesday, wherever you happen to be. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you very much to everyone who has given us some lovely feedback about our nice new look. And again, the same focus. It's good to be back. I know that we are full tilt. Some are still sort of on summer break, but don't worry, we have our eyes on the prize, including after what took place when it came to Bondi. And while it's only been a month and a bit, it does feel a little bit longer, doesn't it? But still, there is that reset period of Christmas and of New Year. We demanded action from our politicians. We wanted politicians to be able to step up and actually ban what was truly the problem. Instead, we got a whole bunch of gun laws, and there are hate laws that are being discussed on the edges. But a new poll has come out to show us that despite all of what they have talked about in the past couple of days, there are things Australians want. Almost 8 out of 10 want that this government has gone nowhere near. The Result Political Monitor, again, in the Channel 9 newspapers, 80% of people wanted tougher immigration to identify anti-Semitic or extremist views. Well, that's kind of in the bill. Introduce heavier penalties for those who incite violence against Jewish people. Well, again, not in this bill. Ban extremist organisations. 81% want to ban Islamist organisations. I apologise for saying extremist. Ban extremist Islamist organisations. 8 out of 10. This bill does not touch it. Tougher hate speech laws. Well, again, some fiddling around the edges, but not the hardcore stuff that we want, and we want it aimed in and around extremist Islam. To ban the pro-Palestine marches, 56% of people. Well, there's some problems with those laws that have come through in New South Wales. I'll explain how that's become rubbery in just a couple of weeks. And to make Holocaust education compulsory in all schools, 51%. I repeat, the middle of those graphs, 81% want Australia to ban extremist Islamist organisations. Now, this potentially can happen if the organisations that are often in the sight of authorities go a little further than they previously had. Now, existing law has been able to shut down hate preachers, but we know that this government, not wishing to offend, and I don't know why or whom they think they are going to offend, it is not going to offend mainstream Islam or any other faith. This is the extreme. This is the fringe. Yet the hate laws that are currently being discussed by Parliament are ones that, believe it or not, the Greens are probably the loudest when it comes to the free speech concerns. One Nation, its concerns when it comes to free speech. Some version of this will pass Parliament in the next couple of hours. Everyone's still going to have their say, but this vote will happen tonight, and a version of hate laws will be put in place. But it is not going to be a dramatic change, and it is not going to be a specific focus like many people want in this country. I repeat, 8 out of 10 want a banning, a specific and explicit banning of extremist Islamist organisations. What in this law will make that happen? They'll tell you that this law will give them that opportunity, but the laws have already given them that opportunity in the past. Yet for whatever reason, and I think we all know why, they haven't done it. Now, to the politics of one thing that did pass the Parliament, and is already now the law of the land, and that is some changes when it comes to gun laws. Now, the federal government has a certain amount of power. This is largely about the states. I'll get to that in a second. But I know there are many people watching us right now, and I certainly know by the number of emails that I've got that there are many angry people watching us right now who say, well, hang on, shooting is an Olympic sport, we should still be able to do it, and guns are used as tools in regional areas. I have no problems at all with that logic. I have noticed the obvious, that with more than 4 million guns in the country, but only about 900,000 licensed firearms owners, then obviously there's multiple guns. Now, some people, as we've seen before, they've got hundreds of guns. Now, these are individuals, and yes, they're collectors, and they've inherited this, and they've bought that, and they've built up their collection, but still, it is a stark number of guns. But today, again, Parliament is patting itself on the back because they have made the changes when it comes to gun laws. We'll debate this in some detail a little bit later tonight. Those who said this is a great idea said this.
Gun buyback is a known source. sharing intelligence information between security agencies before people gain gun licences or firearms. Of course this is in the national interest.
We are doing everything that we can to try and make the community as safe as possible, and part of that means moving forward in terms of gun legislation and restricting the numbers of guns that people can have.
And those that have said that this is not what needs to be the response, well, they are equally as passionate.
What I'm hearing consistently from people in my electorate is they need their guns.
I don't think we have a gun problem. In fact, if you look at per capita, our ownership has gone down since Port Arthur.
Why are we passing gun laws? Oh, as a diversion from the real problem.
Now, again, that real problem being what 81% of people are willing to tell a Age or Sydney Morning Herald poll, which is that they wanted the focus of the recall of Parliament to be very much about the banning of radical Islamic organisations. Not a broad brush, but a very specific and fine pen focused in one particular area. Now, the truth of how these gun laws are going to work is that at the federal level, they really can only organise things like a gun buyback scheme. The limitation on the number of guns to being 4 for the individual or 10 if you are in regional areas is an area that is largely governed by the states and territories. The Northern Territory have said, no, they're not going to make any changes whatsoever. New South Wales, Western Australia have already made pretty tough changes. But in Queensland, we learned today that they too will not be changing the system. Now, in part because, of course, there are many members that are more on the National Party side of the LNP, the Liberal National Party in Queensland. They have decided they are not going to implement these gun laws. The person speaking on behalf of the government today, Sam O'Connor, the Housing Minister, but still speaking as a Cabinet Minister, says they want to get this right. They don't want a knee-jerk response. We've got a comprehensive set of reforms we're considering as a Cabinet. We're going to do this the Queensland way. A considered way. So to those who understandably say, well, hang on, all of this is a diversion, yeah, you're right. But why is the politics around this something that the government has raced towards? Again, the same poll that shows us that Australians have absolute clarity when it comes to radical Islamic organisations. The vast majority of people, and yes, those people are living in the cities more so than the bush, they back gun law changes. Now, I'm not saying this is a way to win you over if you disagree. I'm just showing you any politician who would see that toughening the laws is 76% popular in December and 66% popular in January, they're going to do it. Now, of course, they should do it when it comes to 81% in radical Islam. But this is why the government believes that they are on a political winner here. It's why, in part, the politics of this is going to be interesting about how it will be played by the government over the next little while. So no, this is not me each way murraying on it. It is me saying that obviously 4 million guns is too many for this country to be having. Why? Because 4 million guns is an awful lot of guns. Should there be very serious restrictions about people who live in the cities? Yeah, I think that's logical. Do I think there should be an even more generous system that exists in the bush because those guns are used as tools? You betcha. All of this we again will debate tonight. But again, let's look inside these numbers because I want to show those too, about how Australians feel about those changes to gun laws specifically. Follow along. Restricting gun licences to Australian citizens, 73% say yes. Who the hell are the 10% of Australians, that's the blue, who say no? That it shouldn't be restricted to just Australian citizens. I mean, that has been the law until now, which is insane. You can limit the number of individual guns. Well, that has now happened. That's the same number who want to ban the Islamic organisations. That's 81%. Tougher regulations on high-powered guns, again, 84%, the most popular of all of the measures. 82% placing limits on gun licences, so you need to reapply every few years so it's not set and forget. Again, 8 out of 10 people back that as an idea. This is what you're up against when you have politicians trying to search for a quick and simple solution that, yes, will only apply to legal gun owners, yet the problem can often be illegal gun ownership, and create a firearms database. Again, 5% of people, who are you, who are saying, no, it shouldn't be happening so the guns can't be tracked. We also saw today the next phase. Now, the Prime Minister has been on the back foot because of his own actions or lack thereof, because of his own actions or his failure when it comes to sentiment after the Bondi attack. You know, because we have shown you the polls of the past few days. 56% of people say the Prime Minister's response to Bondi was poor. His overall performance as Prime Minister, same number, say poor or very poor. And his personal likeability down into the negatives now, down 24 points. A quarter of the country changing its mind to the negative on the Prime Minister. This is being noticed by the Spartan members of the full-time press gallery, including our mate Philip Curry, writing in the Australian Financial Review, noticing the Prime Minister has to do another rebuild after yet another summer shocker. Now, we know how this works, and we know how this bloke has been missing. Now, we know this bloke was missing in terms of bringing into law, if these hate speech laws were so definite, so needed, we didn't need 15 people to lose their lives. We needed to do it after the "Where's the Jews" chants that, of course, were heard by others to be "Gas the Jews" in and around the Sydney Opera House in 2023. Literally not a day until we had that particular protest and we had a Prime Minister who was failing to step up in and around that protest. We had a Prime Minister who, yes, said it was a bit shocking, but did not use that as the earth-shattering moment, the line in the sand where something had been broken, to turn around and the need to change the system. We know that after the Bondi attacks, there was the non-appearance at the funerals, there was the very heavily managed appearances like the Bondi Pavilion, where he did it, the day after and very early in the day, because there you see I've done it, but we know that there was part of the reason why the majority of the country thinks he didn't do well after Bondi was because of his failures to turn up. Well, the Prime Minister has decided that attack is now the new form of defence. No longer will he tiptoe around this idea or even continue to do things which he thinks feed into the narrative that he's done anything but the best, and we should, of course, be endlessly thankful for this Prime Minister. Can you believe, after what you have seen, because I know many people watching us now watched all of the shows over summer, have been watching all of the news because it has been that compelling, since that awful weekend a few weeks ago when 15 people were killed in Bondi. Well, the Prime Minister is now trying to say that he didn't go missing. No. He was secretly working behind the scenes to make sure that, like James Bond, he was keeping us all safe.
Our first priority, unashamedly, on the Sunday night, on the Monday, on the Tuesday, on the Wednesday, on the Thursday, was not to worry about politics. Our priority was, were these people part of a cell? Would there be another attack at another place in Sydney? Would there be a follow-up attack in Melbourne? Were Jewish Australians being kept safe? Were the leaders of those communities being kept safe? We upgraded the security measures around the track. Our priority was that. What were the gaps that were missed in security as well through the National Security Committee that has met on almost a daily basis every day since December 14?
Now, this is a very, very fine line that he's running, but it's one that's going to get wider, because this is a little bit like the game when Australians were absolutely crying out for cost of living action, and he turned around and listed a whole bunch of stuff that didn't really apply to most Australians, but because he had a list, he therefore said these were all of the quivers that he was able to fire, the arrows that he was able to fire at the issue when it comes to cost of living. Now, of course, he went on to win an election, so perhaps this political strategy is one that he believes is so bulletproof that you can continue on. But funnily enough, the people who have been watching, who have been paying attention, even in a poll in lefty-leading news organisations, the majority of which, 56%, as I've shown you, review his performance to be poor and his particular handling of Bondi to be poor. But then Attacker's defence stepped up a little today. Now, I think in terms of tactics, theatrics, and how this comes across on television, some of the heightened voice, strong speeches and loud thumping that's happening from the opposition does match the emotion, but when it appears on the 6 p.m. news, it plays into what the government is trying to present here, which is that the opposition is turning up to 11, we're the logical ones that are just dealing with this step by step. But one question that has been repetitively asked of the Prime Minister, because there was a question time today, one of the advantages of Parliament being back just for these couple of days, was this from Susan Lee.
Will you apologise to Jewish Australians because you and your government did not listen?
I say that about the tone because, remember, not everyone sees everything in the raw. What people see is obviously the little bit of highlights on it. So even though, yes, that emotion is appropriate after the many, many weeks and the many, many days and all of the games and all of the gaslighting, but just a note, which is why the Prime Minister responds in a different tone, but he basically turns around and tries to say that all of this is somehow partially the former government's responsibility. Now, remember, the line in the sand that this government could and should have drawn was when the protesters were at the Opera House. Those people were not marching for any other reason than to intimidate. Why? Because we know the entire reason they were at the Opera House was because the Opera House was about to be lit up as a memorial to the people who had been killed 36 hours earlier on October the 7th. They were not there to free Palestine. They were not there to respond to the Israeli government. They were not there to respond to the excesses, as they see them, of the IDF or the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. They were there to intimidate. So the line in the sand should have been then. This Prime Minister was in full control of his powers at that time, yet he did nothing. The doing something has only had to happen after 15 people got murdered. 15 Australians got murdered. Yet the Prime Minister today is back to the politics of blame the libs for everything.
The idea that anti-Semitism began with the election of the government in 2022 is just not right. The Executive Council of Australian Jewry on the 25th of November 2018 said that the 12-month period ending 30th of September 2018 saw a 59% increase over the previous year in total anti-Semitic incidents in Australia involving threats or acts of violence. Let me be very clear, Mr Speaker, all governments should have done better. That is my point. The idea that anti-Semitism began 2 years ago with the change of government is false, and it's declared to be false by the comments of those opposite in senior positions. Despite the surge in anti-Semitism on their watch, did the Morrison government appoint a special envoy to combat anti-Semitism? No. Did they establish a joint operation bringing together the AFP and ASIO to combat acts of anti-Semitism? No. Did they introduce Australia's first ever hate speech laws? No.
Honestly, this is pretty outrageous. Now, the Prime Minister is back on his home turf. He is at the dispatch box. He is in question time. He is in Parliament. He has that commanding number of Labor MPs who he knows, no matter what he says, they will play their part like a TV studio audience when the applause sign goes on. But what a despicable thing for this Prime Minister to do. Now, again, he is trying to fight his way out of the paper bag of which he has placed himself in by failing to match the moment. But the moment wasn't just Bondi. The moment was, yes, many weeks, many months, but certainly that key moment when people were trying to intimidate Jews back in the hours after October the 7th. To turn around and pretend that anti-Semitism exploded under the Liberal government and then just there's been a slight change since is not just misleading, it is downright a lie. Now, this Prime Minister is not scared of saying them because he knows that most of the people in and around the media will give him a free pass. And according to the polls, there has been no significant change in terms of who Australia wants to be its government. The Prime Minister's personal standing may well have fallen, but that just means that one day either he chooses to go and they replace with somebody else, not a change in government overall. For his part, Scott Morrison has generally remained a dignified silence about some of the games that have been played by this government in blaming his, decided to hit the Twitter today and he absolutely got middle stump. Hamas have never praised the actions of my government, Prime Minister. but they did praise yours. I repeat, middle stump from the former Prime Minister, and we should all be concerned about just how low the current one will go to save his own backside. Now, one of the responses to the events of the past few weeks was some snap legislation which went through in New South Wales to guarantee that for multiple weeks after a terrorist event, that there would be no significant political protests that would be allowed either statewide or certain areas of capital cities like, of course, Sydney. Now, the laws were rushed through and it all happened before Christmas, and we were told this was the reason why they were needed and why protest is not good in the weeks after events like Bondi.
These are big changes in New South Wales, and I don't think I can beat around the bush about what the implications are for the state. I know it's a big change. I wouldn't introduce a bill that I didn't believe was sound, and also I wouldn't introduce a reform that I didn't think was absolutely necessary to keep the people of New South Wales safe.
And the police told us this was necessary. Many people pushed back, but the government and the police, and you know we're pro-cop on this show, so we always give them the benefit of the doubt, but remember, their view was this was necessary.
We know that there is a heightened tension in the community. We know that a number of sections of the community are feeling fear. This is not about stopping free speech. It's about making sure that the community has time to feel safe.
Now, obviously, that significant terrorist event has to happen in Australia. Ironically, the laws would not ban something like what happened at the Opera House. I can't believe we keep going back to that as that central issue worth talking about, but it is the moment where Australia had crossed the line, and the failures, including, and you know how much I respect the police, but the failures of police at the time, because remember that protest was meant to be at Town Hall, which is about a 30-minute walk inside the Sydney CBD, but because there was too many of them and there wasn't enough police to push back and they were worried the protesters might blow up, they let them make their way down to the Opera House. We have not heard about an ongoing parade of people who had been arrested after that protest. Instead, it's an event that happened and we don't like to talk about it anymore. Instead, the event that apparently would be banned in events like Bondi for multiple weeks would be things like the protests that happened across the Sydney Harbour Bridge. Now, again, the vast majority of those people said it was about pro-Palestine, it was about free Palestine, it was about pushbacks on what they believed to be the excesses of Israel in Gaza, but we know plenty on the fringes and some up the front were well and truly foot over the line and were very overtly anti-Israel and potentially, on some of those fringes and some of those protests, anti-Jews, which is why this thing was banned from being able to repeat itself after an event like Bondi. But as always, when it comes to the left, apparently your cause is your get-out-of-jail-free card. If somebody wanted to march with a keffiyeh in the weeks after the event of Bondi, it would not be allowed to happen. And today, the New South Wales Police extended the number of weeks where these protests will be banned. But one protest that is going to be allowed to go ahead is the Invasion Day protests. Australia Day, of course, coming up in just a couple of weeks' time. And for those who choose to look at the negative view of Australian history and somehow want to live in the modernity of modern Australia but want to pretend somehow there's some magical time machine where we keep all the technology, we keep the Wi-Fi, but we get to go back to pre-1788, they march. Well, today the police, while extending the ban on one type of protest, was trying to find excuses about why these protests should take place.
The protest that is planned by the First Nations community on Australia Day will be managed down through College Street and out of southern Sydney. I'm satisfied that that reduces the risk to the community. It's an annual protest and it's one that we work very closely with organisers. You have seen in recent years that has been incredibly peaceful, and that is because of the relationship we have with organisers.
And this is what is messy about hate speech laws. This is what is messy about protest laws, is that technically they apply to everyone. Yet very obviously it can be targeted in one way while completely letting off another group. Now, should Australians have the right to protest generally? Yes, of course. The idea that an event on January the 26th on Australia Day, anyone would think has a connection towards events that happened on December 14, well, I think we can all agree that wouldn't be the case. But again, One type of protest will be allowed on Australia Day. One type of protest will not be allowed on the week before, the day of, and the weeks after Australia Day. It is this inconsistency, it is this grey area, it is this power to one person with one pen to decide who they go after and who they let off that does genuinely concern me. Can you know what you think about that or anything else? Send me an email, paul@skynews.com.au. Meantime, as you know, Australia has got plenty of cyclones that make their way up and down our coasts. They become ex-tropical cyclones like Alfred, that of course took place last year. And when these major weather events take place, one of the cute things they do is they decide to name them. Of course, they wouldn't name it Cyclone Tony because then that would be Cyclone Anthony, so we just jumped that, remember, when it came to last year. But you know the game.
Cyclone Koji, Cyclone Alfred, Cyclone Yusi, well, Cyclone Trevor, Cyclone Imogen.
Well, for those who have declared a climate emergency, all major weather events are ones that they believe, well, should be given the same sort of seriousness. We know that because of their definition of a climate emergency, almost anything is justified, including gluing yourself to the road, stopping traffic, or all the other things that have taken place in all of our major cities. We also know that this endless focus on the catastrophised version of what is potentially ahead of us has led to, among other things, the rise of a thing called climate anxiety. Now, we know that many young people take to the streets and have fought for action on climate change. Funnily enough, not as much under this government as they did under the previous one, but I thought it was an emergency. Anyway, but whatever. There's nothing political about these things whatsoever. And yes, there's even people who say 40% of people don't want to have a kid. Why? Because of the climate emergency. So we know for some this is just the big moment, the precipice we must deal with. But now there are people who would like us to take the attitude towards cyclones to summer, or should I say the particularly hot bits of summer. University of New South Wales a couple of days ago posited the question that cyclones get names but deadly heat waves don't. Should Australia do exactly that? After hearing the marching orders, the Sydney Morning Herald, aforementioned, decided to write what I think seemed more like an opinion piece, but they ran it as news. Heatwave Harley, is it time to name these supercharged weather events? Now, I'll give you the idea about, in part, why they want this to happen. Because it's a climate emergency, then any of the extreme weather events must be treated as an emergency, which means they should all receive the same type of labels. And if we know that Heatwave Greg is coming, then we're going to get, like we do before a flood or before a major bushfire or before a tropical cyclone, we get wall-to-wall coverage of that particular event. We get the politicians telling us when we can and can't leave. We get the security, if you know the drill. And then, of course, after it passes, we get the parade of politicians pointing at things to show that they care. Repeat for the next time, repeat for the next time. We'll have some sad news for those that would like to introduce a new big red button for Australia. The United Nations thinks it's a bad idea. University of New South Wales might be talking about it, but believe it or not, when I look at this today, back in 2023, the United Nations, it posited here that about its heatwave naming and about concerns in and around all of these things, well, it said that, among other things, its particular concerns were that these things just distracted the media. It was decided that naming heatwaves events to put focus on the wrong issues. Naming singular heatwave events misdirects, as they say, misdirects the media and takes away the issues which should be really about focusing on who's actually going to be affected by it. It will be fascinating to see if they find a brand new way, but as always, they try to find new ways to scare us each and every day. Often they do it via social media, and we certainly know that it's our politicians who absolutely love using social media. Because while you were working today, and even if you weren't working today, being a Monday, being a Tuesday, you are doing the work. And that means you're paying the taxes to not just pay the politicians, but to pay the staffers to make the politicians look like stars on social media. Like our old mate, Corrie.
They get what they want. I just want you.
Corinne, my apologies. One of our old mates was Cara. Remember the MP who was very excited about a new office and ha, 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 all of that? Well, she again is in full play school presenter mode because remember, that's the way you have to talk down to people.
Hey, sister, go, sister, soul, sister, flow, sister.
And one we had left over, clueless Claire O'Neill.
Hey Claire, you busy?
Hi, of course I am.
Hey Claire.
Hi.
Do you reckon you can tell me your top moments for 2025?
I'd love to.
And I want you to do it in 45 seconds.
Let's have a crack. Well, we expanded the 5% deposit program.
Bad acting from bad actors, and I don't just mean those who can't act. I mean bad actors.